mission to the Marshall Islands. And at the end, we'll have some journalists here, so it's also about receiving questions and answering questions, the ones I can. And obviously, if there's questions and comments from you all, I'll be very happy to also comment and answer. And I'm here with Christian Ragavan. He was part also of the mission and will be here in the press conference supporting any of the questions, answers that we might have. So we were invited by the government of the Marshall Islands, by the Republic of the Marshall Islands. We arrived last Saturday and we stayed for 10 days. Today is our day 10. And it seems like it was very short. I wish I could have stayed 1 month at least. I wanted to go to all the atolls. I carried this method with me. It just broke a little bit here. I'm so sad. I need to fix it. I'm so sad. I put it in my bag and it broke. I've been carrying it for 2 years since I was invited to come here by the ambassador of the Marshall Islands in Geneva. And I had it in my house. And I said to my family, one day I'll be visiting this beautiful atolls and islands and these beautiful people. But I never imagined that it would take me much more time than 10 days. I thought 10 days was enough, but obviously 10 days is not enough. And we were only able to travel, obviously, the Majuro Atoll and Kwajalein, including, obviously, Majuro City, because we were based here. And we visited the islands of Egypt, Lib, and Ibai. But we wanted also to go to Enehueta, we wanted to go to Kiri, we wanted to go to Utrecht, well, we wanted to go so many places and we didn't have the time, so maybe next time we'll visit your communities. We met with government officials, we met with national, island, and atoll level, traditional leaders, members of the diplomatic corps, including representatives of the United States of America, international donors, United Nations agencies, civil society, many of them represented here today. I recognize Marie, and many others. I also met with internally displaced persons, including current and former residents of the 4 atolls, which have historically been recognized as the affected by displacement, and encompassing members of the Bikini, Rondela, Butrok, Enehueta, and Enjebi communities, Kwajalein landowners, and residents of Lib Island who have never received remedy for their historical displacement. The visit was organized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade and National Nuclear Commission. So I want to thank them all here publicly for their cooperation to my mandate and to make the visit as fruitful as it was in organizing it. And obviously grateful for the various ministries, government agencies, members of the Vigela, Council of Europeans, and different people that we met from the different atolls. I also want to thank the UN personnel, members of the different agencies, Hashish, Diego in particular. Both of you are wonderful people. Thank you for making these days better yet here in the Marshall Islands. But obviously I want to express my profound gratitude to the victims of internal displacement in the Marshall Islands for sharing their deeply moving personal testimonies with us, with me. I appreciate your generosity of spirit that you showed me in recounting your experiences yet again, because you've been doing it for many years, so you did it again for me, and I thank you profoundly for that. Knowing that you have shared this so many times, and this morning, someone told me, a woman that I don't see here from Guanajuato, she said, I don't like remembering this because I cry. And my daughter also, she cries. So she prefers not to remember and not to talk about this. And she was laughing, and then she started like, she was quieter, and yeah, I know, it hurts. And talking about it hurts. So I thank you for making the time to mourn maybe a little bit with me again. I hope that mourning and that sharing of your own piece of life with me has been worth it. I hope to make it worth it. Almost half as well. In my statement, I share a little bit of the context that you all know, obviously before you live here. So we say that the Republic of the Marshall Islands faces a complicated and multifaceted displacement situation, one that is inextricably intertwined with the international community's failure to uphold its obligations towards a remote, small island developing state buffeted by forces beyond its control. And this history that you all know of what happened after the end of the Second World War, when the United States assumed the control of the country from the Empire of Japan, and in 46, as an occupying power, with no internationally legitimized jurisdiction over the country, forcibly displaced the indigenous people of Bikini Atoll, comprising some 167 residents, to Rongerik Atoll, before carrying out 2 atomic bomb tests in Bikini Atoll in July of that year. At the same time, the peoples of Vanuatu, Rongelap, and Woto were also temporarily forcibly displaced while the tests were ongoing. Rongerik Atoll reportedly lacked the resources to sustain the population of Bikini for a prolonged period, and food shortages were reported by the end of 1946. And despite the fact that the United States had subjected the Marshallese to forced displacement, nuclear fallout, and food insecurity in less than 3 years of occupation, the United Nations saw fit to grant the United States formal trustship over the Pacific Islands in 1947, comprising the Marshall Islands as well as Palau and the Federated States of Micronesia. And this trustship was unique, as you all know, in that the United States was effectively able to eliminate any checks and balances on its authority by arguing for administration of the islands as a strategic trust, which not only permitted the use of territories covered for military activities, but also ensured that the trust was administered by the Security Council, as you all know, where the United States enjoys veto power as a permanent member, rather than the Trustship Council, which administered the remainder of United Nations trust territories. So over the next 11 years, the United States carried out a total of 65 additional nuclear weapon tests on Eniwetok, Bikini Atolls, with extensive and ongoing displacement consequences, particularly for the Bikini, Rongelap, and the Jebi peoples who remain displaced today, as I had the opportunity to speak with some of you here in this room this morning. In the preliminary report, we also talk about the situation of the people that were displaced in the context of other military activities during the trustship period, to the increasingly overcrowded island in Ibai. And this included the landowners and workers of the Kwajalein Island, which now houses the U.S. Army garrison Kwajalein Atoll, that remains inaccessible as a place of residence, spiritual practice, or for the practice of traditional livelihoods for indigenous inhabitants and their descendants. The transit period also saw the displacement of other indigenous population in the Kwajalein Atoll area, in instances where their traditional lands lay in the impact zones of incoming missiles to be shot down by the missiles defense system being tested at the US military base. This included people from the Lip Island who were displaced between 61 and 66, and the residents of the 13 islands of the Mid-Atoll corridor, who along with their descendants remain displaced today. And finally, all the impacts that the Marshall Islands has because of being a low-lying island state with a mean elevation of just 2 meters above sea level, regarding the threat of the adverse effects of the climate change. So all the issues you face around sea level rise, the problem that has already begun to disrupt the traditional livelihoods through salt level intrusion in agricultural areas. They reduce the amount of habitable land, coastal erosion that forces communities to move inland and provokes cyclical displacement during king tides and other flooding events. That's also something that was part of the awareness that we want to raise. Also the droughts, the typhoons, and all the other climate-related situations that you face in the Marshall Islands, as well as the minimum responsibility that you face around the global greenhouse gas emissions, and how the global community should consequently bear a responsibility towards supporting you in addressing your own challenges regarding climate change, with which your president has been very vocal about this at international forums and arenas. A little bit then around the displacement in the context of the nuclear legacy and the military activities. So we go into depth in the preliminary report on the nuclear testing. These are things that you already know, but they are put here in synthesis, building obviously upon the work that the National Commission has done already, maybe supported by the work that you have already done here. So we talk about the nuclear testing period from the 46 to 58, and that entailed a repeated forced displacement of various people across the Marshall Islands. You know about the Bikini people that were relocated from Montreal to a temporary camp in the Navy base of Kwajalein Atoll, following an independent investigation that found the Bikinians were living under conditions of starvation. Later that year, the people of Bikini moved to the island of Kili, while they had ostensibly voted to do so. It is dubious whether it was a truly free choice and that they were not permitted to remain in Kwajalein, nor provided with a wide range of options for culturally appropriate relocation. Then some Bikinians were displaced again from Kili to Jalwit in 56 to ease the demographic pressure to Kili's resources, but then were forced again to return to Kili 2 years later after the cyclone decimated their homes. But some Bikinians returned temporarily to Bikini in 68 after the United States announced that it was safe to go back, but they were displaced again in 78 after high levels of radionuclides were found in their bodies. They were displaced again to Kili and Egypt Island in Majuba Atoll, where they remain displaced today. So there's this displacement going and going for many years. People from Ewatok Atoll, including the Ri, Ejebi, and Jebi, who historically inhabited the northern part of the atoll, and the Ri and Ewatok also experienced repeated cycles of displacement 145 residents of the atoll were first moved from Ungelang in 1947, but like Wongerik, the Ungelang lacked the resources to sustain large population over long term, and the population had to depend on infrequent deliveries of food and other supplies. So they continued to experience housing and food shortages, and they finally returned to Eniwato in 1979. But the contamination of the nuclear waste contained in the ruling dome in the northern part of the atoll prevented the Negevi from returning to their homes safety, where they are still remain displaced. And exposed to nuclear fallout from the Castle Bravo test in '54, the people from Brongelap and Utrecht were evacuated to Kwajalein. The evacuation was only carried out after the exposure when they were already exhibiting symptoms of radiation poisoning. Furthermore, fallout had spread to the inhabited atolls, including Ailuk, Likiep, Woto, but these populations were not evacuated by the United States. And there was another one, Oche. The people of Rongelap and Utrecht remained in Kwajalein for 3 months, after which they would return home, despite the United States being aware that their homelands remained contaminated. While the Rongelap were displaced to Egypt. The Rongelap returned home in 1957, but as they continued to experience the effects of radiation over the years, they finally requested evacuation again in '85 and were moved to the island of Mejato by Greenpeace, as we all remember. And they remain displaced in Mejato today. And in other atolls and other islands, but most of the population of Rongelap are in Mejato, as you already know. Throughout this period, the people of Rongelap and Utrecht were subjected to covered medical study and experimentation by the United States under the guise of providing health care to these inhabitants as part of the United States Operation 4.1, which is a great violation of ethical norms and the human rights of these already traumatized people. These are things that you already know, but for us it's very important to have the lenses of the displacement. As you have seen, we reaffirm that these are people that are constantly being displaced and impacted in their lives because of these movements that are involuntary movements. Regarding military activities, in 1951, the United States forcibly relocated more than 500 Marshallese citizens from the military base of Kwajalein Island to Ibai, where they had constructed housing for little more than half the population. The United States reportedly did not consult with or obtain the consent of those people displaced. No compensation was provided until 1962, when a lease was signed with the Kwajalein landowners. It is unclear whether these payments reached all of those who have been previously displaced, as they were predominantly laborers residing in the base. The military base was used for the purpose of testing missile defense system, and the United States proceeded to displace various populations in the area to an increasingly overcrowded eBay, as we all know. Also in the 60s, residents of the twin islands of Roy and Namur were displaced without compensation to the island of Enubri to allow the use of the latter islands as a second military base. They remained ineligible for compensation until they reoccupied the lands by protest in 1979, forcing the authorities to compensate them as well. And then the residents of Lib Island endured a 5-year period of displacement between 61 and 66, while their island lay in the impact zone of incoming missiles to be shot down. Also in the 65, the residents of the so-called Mid-Atoll Corridor that are in the path of the missiles being shot from California to test the Kwajalein defense system were also displaced by this fire, while around 194 were displaced at the time. More than 1,470 had traditional claims to the lands in the area. The landowners petitioned the Congress of Micronesia to redress, highlighting the negative impacts of their displacement on their ability to feed themselves, and mounted several protests that resulted in increased compensation. The Kwajalein and Mid-Atoll Corridor landowners and the people of Roy and Namur continued to protest to use their lands for decades. but remain displaced and unable to return home today, save for a few islands in the mid-atoll corridor that are temporarily open to use of the community for burials. The human rights impacts of nuclear and military displacement. This has been, as I said, mentioned by reports of the Office of the High Commissioner and the important work of the National Commission here, but we have like a particular emphasis and lenses towards the impacts as internally displaced persons. So we say that the destructive impacts of nuclear weapons and missile defense testing in the Marshall Islands are not limited to the lands, to the environment, to the bodies of the Marshallese people. We say that they also ravaged the cultural and spiritual fabric that binds the people together. The guiding principles on internal displacement underline the particular obligation of states to prevent the displacement of indigenous peoples in view of their special dependency upon an attachment to their lands, and the case of the Marshall Islands embodies the importance of this principle. Nearly every Marshallese person I spoke to, particularly the displaced persons, emphasized the profound and inextricable ties between one's land and one's sense of identity. While many displaced persons have rebuilt their lives elsewhere in the country, whether on Kili, Mejato, Egypt, or Ibai, they retain a deep sense of dislocation due to their inability to return to their lands of origin. This extends to their spiritual practices, with many reporting that they wait to bury their dead in their hopes that they will be able to inter their loved ones in their soil of their home islands. This is very strong in general for indigenous populations, but we felt it very strongly here in the Marshall Islands. We also heard and perceived that the displaced persons are deprived of their traditional fishing and agricultural practices. That this also is detrimental for their health and their food security. Islands like Ibai, Mejato, and Kili were prior to the onset of displacement precisely because they lack critical features to enable the self-sufficiency of potential residents, including protective reefs, access to lagoons for fishing, and other abundance of arable land, are as seen on the more habitable islands of Kwajalein or the Mid-Atoll Corridor. Many displaced persons recounted the challenges they face now in feeding themselves and their families in their locations of displacement, and reported having to rely on diminishing food shipments of cash or cash assistance by the United States. During my visit, I was hard-pressed to see any example of traditional diet, except on Lib Island, one of the most isolated communities I was able to visit, and one that is not currently displaced from its own homeland. The circumstances of displacement in the context of the Marshall Islands nuclear legacy and ongoing military activities have had significant impacts, as you all know, on the right to health of the people displaced. And as we all know, this is one of the reasons why people out-migrate to seek better health assistance in the United States and elsewhere. And this is more clearly seen in the people that were exposed by the nuclear fallout, and the people that we talked with in the different conversations. They experience, as you know, radiation burns and an increased incidence of cancer, thyroid abnormalities, birth defects, and other health situations. For those displaced, for example, to Ibai, overcrowding and poor sanitation systems also exacerbate the threat of communicable disease such as dengue, for example. We saw that access to healthcare is a general challenge here, particularly for communities outside of eBay and Maduro. And many interlocutors, as I said, highlighted that this was one of the frequent drivers for migrating. There are few specialized doctors. There is no oncologist. There is no psychiatrist, or there's one psychiatrist, I think, for the entire population, which we think is a critical gap in a population that faces anxiety, trauma, etc. Mental health issues that should be addressed. So these impacts that I have shared very briefly illustrate why, under contemporary international law, the principle of free, prior, and informed consent is a foundational principle for the protection of the rights of indigenous peoples, and in particular, the right to self-determination. This principle was not respected in the United States actions towards the Marshallese during the transition period, including both those displaced in the context of nuclear tests and those displaced from military sites. It is legally dubious whether the Marshallese were in a position to provide truly free consent under the coercive circumstances they faced as residents of a non-self-governing territory, negotiating with a nuclear power. Further consent was rarely truly informed, as few displaced communities reported having a clear idea of how long their displacement would last. Many consented after being informed it would be temporary, yet remain displaced today, generations later. Finally, consent was not always sought or obtained, and many were obliged after the fact to sign away their rights to obtain minimal compensation, which cannot be said to constitute prior consent. We also refer to access to justice and remedy for victims of nuclear and military displacement, also a work that has already been done and a path that has begun to be walked by the Nuclear Commission and the resolution. So we say that the actions of the United States during the trustship period constitute a clear violation of several of its obligations as the administrating authority of the trust, including the protection of the inhabitants against the loss of land and resources, the protection of the health of inhabitants, and ensuring their freedom of movement. Despite this, the United States has borne no legal consequences over its conduct during this period. While the people of the Marshall Islands repeatedly petitioned the United Nations to intervene and stop the nuclear tests, their pleas were unheeded. On the contrary, the United Nations sanctioned the continued use of the islands for nuclear testing and did nothing to address other violations of the United States obligations as the administrating authority of the trust. Following the trustship period, the government of the Marshall Islands declared its independence, as you all know, in '79, while the United States recognized its constitutional. At this time, full independence was granted until the entry in force in '86. This agreement not only granted the compact not only granted the United States full authority over security within the Marshall Islands, but formalized the forced displacement perpetrated during the trustship period through subsidiary agreements which granted the United States continued military use of areas occupied in Kwajalein Atoll, and the Section 177 agreement, which established, as you all know, trust funds for the compensation of the peoples of Vanuatu, Bikini, Utrik, Rongelap, and later a dedicated community trust fund that was established for the Ngeri community. The 177 agreement also provided for payment of claims related to nuclear losses and damages, the cleanup of affected atolls, and access to services. However, it contains a clause that required the termination of ongoing lawsuits, ending a legal challenge brought against the United States by the people of Bikini, and foreclosing the possibility of any future claims for nuclear damages, as we all know. The compact, as you know, has been renewed twice over the years with new provisions during its initial passage as well as during the subsequent renewals, notably the most recent, 2023, Compact 3, as we heard it's called. Many interlocutors also shared concerns that the process was marked by lack of transparency and inclusivity, with little input from displaced communities and other victims of the nuclear and military legacies. We believe that this causes painful memories of agreements that were done during the trustship period, and this makes people feel isolated and affects the dignity of the communities. However, we feel as well that the government of the Marshallese Islands bears responsibility, as I was informed that negotiations did not always include all relevant government officials, nor build inappropriate checks and balances with some in government, surprised at the end of the outcome of the negotiations. So we make some recommendations about more transparency, more inclusivity in these recommendations, because we think that's important for the trust and for finally the dignity of the people. There's the issue of the increased number of adults eligible for assistance in the new compact. We know that the negotiations refuse to include any reference to the country's nuclear legacy tied to assistance provisions in the document, arguing that the nuclear claims had already been settled in the 177 agreement, and that such assistance was provided due to extraordinary needs of the covered atolls, although these are widely considered to have been selected on the basis of their exposure to nuclear fallout. Though not all the atolls suspected of being subjected to fallout are included. So we see this approach as a bit incoherent. We didn't find any explanation for the inclusion of some atolls, not other atolls. So it seems a bit of as a charity provided thanks to the generosity of the United States. For us, this approach denies the dignity of the victims of the nuclear legacy, and has also fomented, we perceived in the different interviews, internal divisions, as the addition of new atolls under unclear circumstances to those eligible for assistance has created some resentment from some of the original atolls. But this is something that we just recommend more transparency and clarity in these negotiations at the end. We also were disturbed to hear that the trust fund established for the support of those displaced, some of the trust funds have been mismanaged with potential criminal implications, leading to the depletion of funds and the precipitous drop in the standards of living of community members. So we recommend as well investigations that are swiftly done to clarify these irregularities, and that perpetrators are held accountable. That's important for the communities, that's important for the transparency and obviously for the dignity of the communities. There's a lot about the compensation and the change of circumstances that the government has already pursued, and some of the arguments around that, those claims. We have recommendations around that. We say that the search for remedy, we believe it's frustrated by the unfulfilled right of the displaced persons and other victims of the nuclear and military legacies to information. This is also in the resolution. We think There has to be, as we said, transparency, but also information that hasn't been declassified. People don't have confidence in information that has been provided by the United States, particularly in regard to the radiological assessments and environmental impacts, given obviously the long legacy of partial and incomplete information that has been provided. So this is something also that we saw and that we recommend that is taken forward as something that we would claim to know and to have access to truth and to information. In terms of displacement in the context of disaster and climate change, as you well know, the country faces periodic displacements due to the effects of climate change. The frequency and intensity has been increasing in the recent years. We believe because of the accelerated climate change, more flooding, skin tides. We talk with the authorities, the disaster management authorities, and we see that the shelters sometimes are the schools, and obviously schools are not fit for this purpose, so this has to be like a temporary solution, and we hope the government finds like alternative solutions for this type of emergencies, because also the education for the children is also impacted. The ocean warming, the acidification, periodic coral bleaching events that are threatening the fish stocks. We also see that that's related to the sea level rise and all the affectations that has on the traditional diets. We also see that's affecting the Marshallese health and access to food security. We also see that the impacts of climate change intersect with the nuclear and military legacies, because some of the communities, the Bikini, the Rongelab, were relocated in marginal lands that are vulnerable or more vulnerable to climate change affectation, so that's something also to take into consideration. I commend the government of the Marshall Islands also, and that's important to say this in this afternoon today, for seeking also to address the challenges of climate change through different policies, different mechanisms. Was the first country, the Marshall Islands was the first country in the world to submit a nationally determined contribution in relation to the efforts to reduce national emissions in regard to the Paris Agreement. It has also adopted 2050 climate strategy, the TLEO, with a vision of net zero emissions for 2050. It has sought to adapt the changing realities it faces, passing a disaster management act. It has approved a national adaptation plan with a very important consultation process, including outer islands, vision for the communities. That's very important. So we commend the government for all that, like proactive engagement. We also think there are significant challenges in terms of the response to disasters and displacement disasters, coordination between the different stakeholders, between the national and the local, obviously because of the capacity and the distance to reach out to the outer islands. We understand that the displacement is not systematically included as a consideration in all the relevant policy documents, but we think it's very important to stress the disaster preparedness at community level, because we feel it remains a gap. We talked to communities, and it was hard for them to identify who were the instances, who were the responsible engaged in the disaster preparedness exercises. There's also a work in progress from the government in improving their data systems. We heard, and I think it's important, we encourage the government to continue with that process, to the storage of information, the management of systems, and we think it's very important, all the work that the NDMO is doing on integrating systems of information. We think that's a way to go forward, obviously addressing the needs of the particular populations, the women, the youth, older persons, persons with disabilities, etc. We also see that there's cultural issues related to the traditional land tenure system that pose challenges to the effective implementation of climate change mitigation and adaptation measures. So we found that the process that it's ongoing, sensitizing this issue that has cultural implications, it's very important. We heard that this is already happening with the different stakeholders. I encourage you to continue that because everyone has to be aware and we all have to adapt, and so we encourage you and we give some recommendations towards that process. And we also know that securing access to adequate resources to implement this disaster response is a challenge. The NAP is a very good NAP. It's very ambitious. It's very it has a vision, but it's underfunded. So we commend the efforts that the government is doing to seek resources and financing for financing the NAP. Some conclusions, because I've been speaking too much, but this has been a long report. So, as I said, the Republic of the Marshall Islands is dealing with displacement challenges on multiple fronts as a result of existential challenges imposed upon the country by the international community in general. The country and its people, and this is a very important message that I want to send here today, and I want this to be said in this room as a message, are not mere victims. You have actively sought redress for the injustices. You are more than victims. You are not defined by that. You are defined by a very rich culture that has taught the world many things. So you're not defined by that, and it's very important. But that strength, that courage, that's moving you, and that's what we are hearing from you to tell the story also to the world. So you have sought redress. You have fought for the injustices, and you have continued to fight, and now you're doing it, and you've been doing it for many years, but you're doing it now with a very strong international human rights diplomacy. The Republic of the Marshall Islands now has a seat again at the Human Rights Council, as we know, for the period 25-27. You are pursuing nuclear justice through the implementation of the Resolution 5135 on the nuclear legacy, which was, as you know, was just renewed this week. It was very encouraging to know that we were hearing those two things happening while we were here. You are a leader, as I said, at the regional and international level of efforts to combat climate change. You sponsored the resolution that created the mandate of the Special Rapporteur for Climate Change, and was recently also continued, approved again. So it's very important. You're doing a very important work at that level. So I commend you for that, and I recommend that you build upon these efforts, and I recommend the Marshall Islands government to adopt a comprehensive policy on internal displacement, covering all forms of displacement and all aspects of the displacement cycle, with an institutional body, maybe one that's already established, that is charged with oversighting and implementation of the policy across all the relevant areas. Hopefully, with a rights-based approach that considers the situation of the internally displaced person in their full diversity, with a particular sensitivity towards the indigenous realities and needs of the people. I would also encourage the government to pursue measures to promote greater transparency around issues relevant to the protection and remediation of internally displaced persons, including community engagement and sensitization, as well as the involvement of all relevant government officials in negotiations, when possible, because I understand it's negotiations, but there should be more transparency. There are implications that impact the displaced communities, such as those related to the Compact of Free Association. I also call for the transparency and accountability in the management of the funds allocated for the benefit of the displaced persons, including full investigation, as I said, of any irregularities and implementation of the appropriate management arrangements. At the disaster management and climate adaptation policies, I encourage the government to continue strengthening coordination mechanisms, ensuring coherence across the different programs. The government should continue the work that it's doing, as I said, with traditional landowners to ensure that they are engaged in this climate change awareness and mitigation and adaptation response efforts. Obviously, I encourage the government to continue the implementation of its pledges under the Human Rights 75 initiative, including to work towards nuclear justice and the possible establishment of a national human rights institution, which we think will be very important for the Marshallese people. Finally, three things. As you have learned from our preliminary report, I believe that the United States of America bears a particular responsibility towards the Marshall Islands in view of its long and checkered history in the country and its continued contribution to the displacement of indigenous Marshallese from their homelands, as well as its military and financial influence. It must not obfuscate its own role in some of the most painful chapters of the Marshallese history. First and foremost, I urge the United States to issue a full and comprehensive apology for the atrocities visited on the people of the Marshall Islands during the trustship period. This was one of the most important messages that I heard from the Marshallese people, wanted me to reflect on my report, and I also believe it's the first step towards healing and dignity and probably reconciliation. Secondly, I would urge the United States to re-examine the displacement and other violations of the human rights of the Marshallese people, that its actions continue to cost today, and pursue an approach that seeks to provide meaningful remedy to victims. An initial step will be, as I said, to acknowledge the nuclear damages that have not been remedied by the paltry past settlements, and to fully fund payment of the claims assessed by the Nuclear Claims Tribunal, as well as contribute significantly to the Marshall Islands' efforts to combat the effects of climate change and compensate others affected by displacement whose stories remain not fully acknowledged, including the people of Leave Island. The United States should also provide the displaced landowners and residents of Kwajalein, the Milato Corridor, and Roy Gamur with regular access to their traditional lands for traditional livelihoods and spiritual activities, while re-evaluating the terms of its use agreements for these areas with a view to providing affected indigenous communities with a meaningful opportunity for free, prior, and informed consent, including the right to request repossession of their lands. Finally, the United States should expand its disclosure of relevant information to the Marshallese people, including on the full scope of nuclear tests and the impacts of ongoing missile tests, to rebuild trust and enable them to live in safety and security. Lastly, the United Nations owes a major debt to the Republic of the Marshall Islands for its negligence during the trustship period and dismissal of meritorious petitions brought to its attention at great cost by the Marshallese people. Like the United States, the United Nations must apologize for its role in the Marshall Islands' nuclear and military legacies. It should also give weight to these apologies by strengthening its presence in and assistance programs to the Republic of the Marshall Islands to tackle critical challenges including access to healthcare, livelihoods, resilience, environmental safety, climate change mitigation and adaptation, and disaster response. Finally, I would like to thank, as I said at the beginning, the government for the invitation. I reiterate my willingness to support the efforts to protect and promote the human rights of the displaced persons, but I mostly, as I said at the beginning, want to thank the communities, the displaced people, the different authorities, civil society, and obviously all of you that have beared with me talking for more than the 10 minutes that I promised, obviously. I hope it was important for you, and most of all, I hope this is not only a report. I was talking with the president and the government previously and said that once these reports are written and will be presented in June to the Human Rights Council, we become part of the same almost family, because I need to oversee that the recommendations of the report are implemented. No? So we're going to be working together to push for those recommendations. No? I'm a new advocate, I'm a new ambassador, I'm a new friend at the end of the Marshallese people, the displaced people. Count on me for that. Thank you for all the generosity of your time, and I hope to be back soon here to see you. And okay, so Krishnan is telling me that we will post online the report, and hopefully soon or immediately, as we're going to work on that, but we're going to have it translated to the Marshallese so you can disseminate it. Because one of it's very important. Many communities said, and this is something that I began talking about, we have told this story many times. We have read reports many times. People have come here many times. Sometimes we don't see those reports, people don't come back, don't tell us what happened, no, there's no feedback, there's no... So, so I count on you as well on that. So we write it, we translate it, we have different partners here, so maybe we can do like online dissemination of the main recommendations after, but it's very important that communities are aware that this report was put at that level at the Human Rights Council, and that we have a strategy to follow up on the recommendations. Yeah, so that's all from our side. Thank you very much. Thank you. Action.
Good question.
Yeah, so we can take that. It's not working.
Yeah, so the floor is now open. If anyone has a question for the Special Rapporteur, especially I know we have some journalists here today, but of course also members of the community, you're welcome. Thank you, Special Rapporteur Paula, for your presentation and report. My name is Wilmer Joel. I think I just have two questions in regards to all the things that were being said and mentioned. I would like to first start with, you've mentioned that you've met with numerous high-level officials, with government, traditional leaders, civil society, but have you met with the young people? And have you gotten their side of the story? Because they too, and their future, will be affected in regards to nuclear legacy and displacement as faced by their elders and their parents. And my second question is, when you were talking about doing investigations as one of your recommendations, and you say that sorry for my pronunciation, will be held accountable. What do you mean by that? Thank you.
You take more questions? Or?
You want whatever? I
To you.
can answer. Thank you. Thank you for the question. And yes, in the meetings we had with the communities, there were young people. I didn't have like a space only for young people. We tried to reach out, but we couldn't like have a specific meeting with young. But in the meetings, there were young people. The first day that I arrived, the Sunday, we went to Egypt, and there was a young boy that said that with the nuclear, he was from Bikini, and he said that I had it written down. He said something like that with the bombs, the culture was like, he did like, you know. And that now he, with other young people, are trying to bring it together. And he spoke about this way of doing the canoes. You know, the kekshek korkok? Yeah, is that right? Jek korkok? Yeah? Yeah? You know what that is? Okay. He said that was like a canoe building. Okay. Okay. So he said that for example, that he wanted to promote that the community, because you know the Bikinians had to be displaced, and so that's what happened with displacement. You know that and what also without migration. You know that you lose ties and you lose connection to culture. So I was impressed, and with other young people that I spoke to, a young lady from Rongelap community that's living in Mejato. She read kind of like a poem, and she said something that she dreamed of a place that she said, I dream of a place I call home that I have never been to. Huh? And that's like a metaphor of everything that I heard here. People call home a place that they have never been to. And she told me that she was from Rongelap, and she said, I've never been to, but my grandmother speaks all the time about the culture, so yeah, just to tell you that I was very impressed that the young people that I spoke to have such like a strong connection with the culture that they want to preserve. But I know that's not easy because if you want to do that, you need resources, you need support from the state. So I don't know, the ministry left, the Ministry of Culture left? He left? Ah, okay. The Ministry of Culture, I asked him because I was very intrigued of what are the policies that the government is like doing for young people, no? And there's this about the language, for example, because they were saying that the language is getting, it's the people that migrate to the US, they don't have their grandparents to speak the language. So the language is getting lost, no? So that's the essence of preserving the culture, for example. So yes, anything that you can recommend, that I can recommend, I will recommend in terms of how the youth can contribute to preserving the culture. So well, that's what I saw. But if you can share also your own perception of how the youth see reality here and are impacted by displacement, I would like to hear you saying it. If you want to share, I'll be very happy to listen to you now, if you want to share. And the other, accountability on the management of the trust funds. Accountability and, is it on that or what, where, he said, yeah. Is it on the trust funds?
Yeah, my question was, when you said prepper for those who did something wrong, be held accountable, how will that take place and what do you mean by that? Perpetrators.
Yeah, but I don't know if it was on the trust funds or it was on other matters.
It was, I think, on the matters pertaining to the trust fund.
Yeah. Well, we spoke with Ministry of Justice. They say those investigations are underway currently. But there's the money of the people. I mean, those investigations have to be as they have to be. It's resources, it's a due process, obviously, but they have to be investigated. And I don't know the criminal code here, but I mean, there has to be a sanction for the misuse of resources that are not that are for the people. No, that's what I think. But I don't know. I haven't seen your criminal code. I don't know what's the sanctions. How far away can that go? I don't know. Responsibility. There has to be responsibility. Civil and probably criminal. No? It's money. It's resources of the people. We have to see. I don't know. Accountable means that. I wanted to change with this. No, but give it the big one. You can give it the big one, yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm Hugh Johnson with the Marshall Islands Journal. Couple of questions. First one is, when do you expect this report to be available publicly?
This preliminary one, the one I read today?
Right.
I think tonight when we finish like editing some of the issues we just wrote.
So it'll be, that'll be circulated publicly?
Yeah, this is the preliminary one, yes. Yes.
All right, second question I have is, so you recounted the history of the Marshallese experience with the U.S. nuclear test program in, I'd say, rather excruciating detail. And even though it was just a brief summary verbally, fundamentally, the U.S. nuclear test legacy is a Marshall Islands, United States issue. And the United States has primary liability and responsibility to Marshallese people for the nuclear test legacy that it caused and continues to have ramifications for people. How does your report have anything to do with the U.S. government actually coming to the table and doing something? Because what person after person here has said today is, how long are we going to have to talk about this? And they've stated, people have stated their issues and the problems, and it's very well documented. You've obviously very well documented it. But it's a U.S. issue. And yes, the United Nations, it would be great if the UN did some things, but it wasn't the United Nations which actually bombed and displaced people. It was the U.S. government. So how does your report have any impact on the United States to help resolve this matter? Thank you.
Okay, so I had the question from communities asked, what does the report, how does the report really, is the report going to change my life? Is the report going to impact in some way my situation? It can and it cannot. I mean, reports can be just reports. So obviously I presented, as you know, in the forum of the Human Rights Council in June. I need to lobby, obviously. I need to do, maybe work with the ambassador of the Marshall Islands there and other advocates, maybe that you know how with the resolution. I saw that the nuclear legacy resolution was signed by many new, states. So maybe we have to think of a strategy. I cannot say. You can all help me with the strategy as well. But I'm going to be a voice, and the report, this is preliminary, as I said, because it's 1 week work and what we gather from reports, other reports that we read, and academic documents that we read, and all the research that many of you in this room have done. We hope that the one for June, obviously, is much more strong in substance. So that's something that we are going to work with different colleagues and make a point. I mean, definitely, I have to plan a strategy to do bilaterals with the U.S. You know, I met here with the ambassador. I talked to the embassy as part of the stakeholders that I had to meet. I addressed some of the concerns. I asked some of the questions, as I asked the government as well and other actors. So I'll continue that. I'll continue my engagement. I'll continue my advocacy for the human rights of the Marshallese people. I think there was a lot of injustice. I mean, there's injustice, there's unfairness, there's violations of human rights. I mean, you know, and if I recommend things in a report, it's because I believe them, and I'm going to, how do you say that? To go as far as I can go to make these recommendations applied, no? But I cannot promise anything because, you know, it's a soft power. The special rapporteurs are independent experts that can move things, that can raise awareness, that can participate in different forums, but it's soft power, no? But I think I'm happy that this report is going to land in a context that I think the Marshall Islands have been building I see it as an important momentum, I think, because, I mean, the presence in the Human Rights Council, the resolution approved, then this report is going to come some months after, you know, speak about Marshall Islands, speak about, I don't know if you heard the Nobel Prize, Peace Prize, given to an NGO from Hiroshima. No? Do you hear? That's important. It's victims of atomic bombs. I mean, it's you in the radar as international, in the radar of international interest, no? So, yeah, that's all I can say. You know, I wish I could do more, but I'll do all I can. I'll do all I can.
Yeah, you're okay with that? Okay. I'll just be brief, Paula. Gabe and I usually agree on when it comes to nuclear justice issue. A percentage of our discussion on this issue, we almost agree on almost everything. But I think a little bit different from him on this particular issue of the role of the United Nations in this nuclear legacy, what I call it justice. It was the United Nations that permitted the trusteeship administered United States to actually conduct the test of the Marshall Islands. So you're back here trying to perhaps assist us in any way you can. I think it's already a successful endeavor, just having you here, because you are going to be our voice in the international arena, the biggest arena in the world, United Nations. So that's a plus for us. But what we really expect as a result of trip like this is actual outcome where there are specific time frames where we are recommending addressing these issues. As I said earlier, you were not here. 12 years ago, Colin Kosescu was here, September 3rd, 2012, basically doing the same thing that you're doing right now. That's about 12 years ago. We are patient people in the Marshall Islands, regardless of all that we've gone through and sacrifices that we've made for the peace of all mankind in the world in general. As a result of the 67-pound test in the Marshall Islands, especially the problem shot that displayed a massive power. The USS are receded from the Cold War with the United States. It was displayed, unfortunately, as a result of it, we continue to suffer today. So, what I wanted, and I posted this online, I don't know if you've seen it or not, when you were asking for us to register for this conference. I did register, and the question I posed was, what is justice? I wanted you or your colleagues to tell us what your belief definition of justice. We know by Webster's dictionary it's a reasonable, outcome of addressing, and I think that is justice. But you as a special rapporteur, what is your definition of justice? And once you answer that, I'm going to give you our definition of justice. Survivors. Just for the record, I'm Kenneth Katie. I am the director for the Nuclear Institute, the former Speaker of the Parliament, and was actually heavily part of the negotiation team that negotiated the compact. And I saw some of your recommendations and concern on the transparency part. I agree. I actually agree. Although I was part of that negotiation team, I agree. At the end of the negotiations, the commission that was established by the President's office was decommissioned. And then a couple fellow kind of took over the whole thing from the stars. So that's domestic. We'll just talk about that on the side. But I agree with that recommendation. So let me hear your definition of peace and let me give you ours as survivors. And I'm also speaking as a son of Roland, people of Roland, that were exposed and were using the same things, the Project 4.1 as you mentioned. So let me hear your definition and I'll just give you ours. What is the definition of justice in your view?
I thought you were going to give me yours first. No?
Okay, let me give you mine. Then I'll give you But you basically address a lot of that in your preliminary report. So during that Human Rights Council presentation in 2012, I brought two survivors with me. Lemay Awan was one of them, and former Senator J. Rodriguez also. And Lemay's statement resonated with me every time I talk about this issue. Not only because you were directly exposed to radiation and live with cancer, and drink a lot of medicines, including citrate and calcium supplement to support your cancer, thyroid activities, and so on. Quote, it was the day I first experienced injustice. She was referring to the barbershop, not the test thereafter. And then later, when the military came and picked Romani's up, according to a report, and she verified the same. 3 days after the barbershop, in her mind she was thinking, wow, okay, we're going to be fine now. We have this military going to take care of us. But then this is all started. The inhumane treatment of our survivors, and many citizens of martial arts. They start using them as a subject. And see now radionuclides working their body. The rats and the mouse and goats and you name it, they're no longer needed. They actually have the human beings into them without their consent, by the way. So justice in our definition is full compensation of $3.18 billion that the US owe us, according to the tribunal judgment that was established by both the RMI and the US government under the compact, when it was enacted in October 21st, 1986. The second one is quality health care. You mentioned the fact that there is no oncologists on island, no psychiatrists to take care of the mental health issue, and many others. Every now and then we run out of Tylenol with our so-called national hospital, which I call a very tiny clinic, compared to the counties in the states. And the third one is to live in an environment that is radiation-free, as God intended, as justice. And then an important issue you also mentioned, full disclosure. How can we charter our future special health when we are here to learn of what happened? We understand we have to write the document, especially the formula on the bottom and so on. But that's done with. Why are we still not receiving those documents? So we can learn of what happened here, so we can then take action necessary to take care of ourselves. So, and I think another justice revolution as a son of all and a survivor. My mother died of cancer, my grandmother. I buried too many members of my family as a result of cancer. It's a common thing in the national life. You don't see it anywhere, you see it here. We are getting tired of burying people with cancer as a result of radiogenic diseases, the contracted from the nuclear test. So, continue to educate our young people. The president of the student body, Institute for the College of the Martial Arts, where I also work, is here. My email was sent to me and I forwarded to our nuclear club, our students, to join us. They're also here. I don't know if they're able to join us, but I really genuinely believe, and I agree with the young man that spoke, that we need to continue to educate our young people. So as long as this is not fully addressed, we have to continue to educate them. So I think that's also part of that justice. So I want to thank you for this trip and looking forward to your presentation. I think the Human Rights Council and we support 100%. And I also agree that the folks, the leaders that have abused the funds that belong to the people, the survivors and us, they must be taken to the appropriate areas, including the Vigilance Office, the court, and whatever. I also support what the young man said as well. I was asked when I was in the United States Congress, what assurance can you give me, Mr. Speaker, Senator, for that you will protect the additional millions of dollars you're requesting in here. Because we know you're behind us, your local governments and other entities are in bad situation. So I also agree that that should be pursued as one of the recommendations as well. We fully support your preliminary report so far. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. How big are your feet? These shoes I don't want, but they're too small.
In addition to my comments earlier, when you and I were able to briefly sit down and discuss, although we had a very short time to discuss our issues, I have one last question for you in terms of NOLS issues.
I comment you now what you want in technology. Tane, telephone, regardless, telephone,
I will use an example of technology because it's something that Americans or foreigners may better understand.
What? Here, I must tell you what you and what
I am a council member for NOLF local government, as I mentioned before. Life in the islands have been altered lately.
Government America. Urjona Printervalilo, Turio 1952. Pixelulilo, Nejolo. Along there, when I get caught in farming with company doing what and I love Lavai, Kayulo, Melilo, and Poprai is getting covered around.
My question is to the United States government. In 1952, we were told that the more studies that they had done from the nuclear weapons testing, the better they would be able to protect themselves.
Elementary, over Marshall Island, and whether Kim Chalala in Dover and Switch Abamba, I gave the when Kayurkin, the new Raka Union.
Because of this, for the people of NOLF, life in NOLF has been deteriorating. However, for the United States government, their source of strength comes from the testing and the experiments that they had learned from in our islands.
So, anyway, I can believe America, you know, I'm qualified to Europe, I, so you know, I realize June, Paul, Internet, with $50 billion. June in Germany, and Roland Germany, I think election, Paul Wilbur, and we do $1 billion.
I set the example of the United States spending billions of dollars on devices and weapons to use for destruction and during warfare. However, for the people of Anahuac, where a lot of destruction had taken place, were only given millions of dollars.
$1 billion, you know, $1 million, and whether they know what $1 million. Army no ye below Navada and they were no ye or the Java Navada. Other you know that people everyone will be low poisoning. And maybe the Wire keep on living on you, one bar catching one mile over the darling may vegetable nan be now. But they don't have to know in the game. Thousand bagi ini kubal ini kita yang berbili darah orang muai pinjam orang orang biar dengan darah ini semua orang pilih dua orang muai.
The amount of money that's given to Anahuac is only in millions of dollars, and what he was saying earlier was that life on Anahuac, as mentioned, is the quality of life is deteriorating very much. However, this has been an ongoing discussion over such a long time, and we're posing the question to you to see if there would be any way that you would be able to, I guess, amplify our voices.
Nice, pun jalan awal kan arah ini pun mereka maju. Ini kan kita pun pilihan dah, ini kan pilihan dah. Kalau dah orang, orang jalan muai, mereka kan cuma kan pen orang mana dulu kan, dengan cinta dan jaga.
I speak and I am confident that the rest of the audience in the room agree with me that millions of dollars, million dollars for the people of Anahuac especially is insufficient. However, there is a lot of sickness that we are living with.
Well, yung rock, yun po lang idea mo ipa. Kung ano po yun yun, probably ito government yun. Talaga yun. Jadi mo yun yung ano, ang server, well, we know that dito mo dito yung online, yung government yung dahil America India television what advocacy.
This is all I have to say. We understand that the problems are within the government, but we are posing our question to you in hopes that your means of communication and passing along this information would somehow require the United States to act on our.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This morning we had talked. This morning we had spoken, and we also there's echo. We also took your maybe from Lincoln, your observation around where are the resources, where did the resources of the trust went. So we are also going to put that in the report. And around this, I mean, there's no money that compensates the damages that were done in terms of the question about culture, you know, about justice. When you talk about these damages and these impacts, there's never going to be enough money. How can you balance and how can you acknowledge the damage that has been caused to a nation, to its culture, to its identity, to a community? I mean, you never put it in terms of resources, so it's never enough just to start saying. But also it's about all the compensations that I'm sure are pending in the tribunal. I don't know the status of the ones in Irapuato, but I'm sure that there's some that were presented and are pending. So I'm sure it's also that. And obviously in our report, we're going to do recommendations around those pending compensations that have to be acknowledged and recognized. So that's something that we're going to recommend in the report. I don't know if that answers the question. If there are no more questions on the question of justice, for me justice is what justice is for you. I mean, I cannot have a concept of justice for the Marshallese people. It's the concept that you have of justice, no? But what I have seen and what I reflect, hopefully I will reflect in the report, is that this country is a country that has profound cultural and obviously it's an indigenous-based community. No, that's what you are. That's what your ancestors are. That's what your traditions are. That is completely your land and your identity and your culture is one. You cannot fracture that because it fractures who you are as a nation, as a culture. So with the displacement and with what was caused, that was impacted. So justice is made when that is translation? Okay.
Go back to
No, but I was just like, No, because you're asking, what's my definition?
I'll just translate your last piece for you.
I didn't finish, but I was just so inspired.
Then, Indian and justice, I told you my what. Similarly, multi Maya, Makan Mandewa, Puri War, and ya pengen dia orang lain tentang kalau justice nanti, kalau apa video yang kita justice ya, cuma mana tu baru nuare, tak cukup orang lain.
Took over this seminar or what? They had another one.
People, los already phenomenal about it. But they have June to my media that the billion. But that's injustice. That meaning that we would say that they were given $1 million in compensation, but the US was able to reap billions of dollars as a result of
The
those.
who was it?
So that's an example of injustice. That's what I was trying to say.
The US was able to what? I don't understand.
Nuclear justice issue definition. And there was earlier they were also mentioning something about the way they tested, about the level of radiation with the urine sample and also with the level of cesium and in their radiation in their blood. And they've been doing it, but every time they asked what the results were, they were told, it's okay, no problem. So they were lied to. They were not explain the actual results of the testing. That came up this afternoon where they were giving their testimonies. So there was also another that came up from one of the councilmen that they want to be relocated from Kili, that they were working on a resolution to be relocated from there. But that's what he was saying. Let's see, what was the other? There was another new information for me about this that they brought up. I never thought about it before because I didn't know. And the other one has to do with about the impact of the missile testing program on them. I didn't know about that. So I would recommend that the United States needs to request or to answer the change circumstance petition in the compact, which was totally in compact 1. It is now compact 3, and it hasn't been resolved. There was a request for $2 billion to add on because the compact 1, there was a section 177, and there was a change circumstance that if they find more information on the effect of radiation and the testing, the human experimentation that they did on our people, then they would accommodate the needs. And even though there was a request submitted, it never, I was told that it never reached the U.S. Congress. It got stuck in the U.S. administration. But that's another lie that they did. They never were able to do that. So that needs to be dealt with. At that time, compact 1, it was $2 billion. So I don't know how much it's going to, if you adjust inflation and all that, increase in cost, that would add more, so that needs to be readjusted. So that would be the ease, at least more simpler, that this kind of mission can do to pressure the United States to at least deal with that, because they had promise of that under compact 1. Thank you.
Do you understand what she said? Not particularly. I don't understand anything.
My words to you were coming in the form for us to have a view and for the United States to look at it in a way. What I am trying to say is that the United States used Venezuela as a testing ground to improve their weapons of mass destruction. And at that time, they were doing this testing to improve their own weapons and the way they're building these things. They did not consider the lives of the people of Anahuac and the health of the people of Anahuac. And today, people of Anahuac live with $77 on a quarterly basis. And the housing in Anahuac, the houses in Anahuac are in very poor condition, and there seems to be no plan to renovate these houses. And the U.S. spends billions of dollars for war, especially in other countries, and for people of Anahuac, they seem to just be disregarded. That understood.
Family, yeah, there's cultural problems. No, culture. No. Thank you. No, thank you very much. And this morning we had spoken about the church, that you have like this ship anchor in the church, the anchor. This image, it's a metaphor, it's beautiful. That it was made for like the people to stay like a symbol. And instead, people left because they were displaced, or now because they don't have the conditions to live there. There's no lack of services, lack of agriculture, the family are not together, so there's culture, cultural ties. Yes, so thank you very much. We are trying to include all what we have heard today, and obviously from now until April, we will gather as much information as we can to complete and have like a better and more, like a stronger report, as I was saying before, to make a stronger case. But repeating that the approach is the internally displaced persons. We feel that it's the first time, and with the invitation that the government made to the mandate, that the Marshall Islands is seeing the situation as a human rights, problem and protection of the internally displaced persons, and we think that's an important approach that will bring more, finally, guarantees and protection for the rights of the internally displaced persons. So thank you again, yeah, I hope to see you soon. Thank you. I have to change.
Sorry, we couldn't.
Let's run to the airport, no?
No, but also
No,
I
run,
just
no,
we've
it's
let
a las
the time
8:15.
go. We do have to